And this is of course the next game coming from Jagori Games, and it does take place in the same universe as their previous Arena of the Contest games, but this is its own standalone game. Similar to the previous games, this one is also a cooperative dungeon crawler campaign game, but in this one players are going to be playing as different pirates amongst a crew, and players are going to be playing through different quests made up of multiple encounters. All of the different encounters as well as their map are going to be offered through a spiral bound booklet, and it's also going to provide any special rules or narrative or any win and loss conditions for those particular encounters. Players are going to be playing as asymmetrical characters with different strengths and weaknesses as well as their own passive powers and ultimate attacks. You will always be playing with 4 heroes even if there isn't that many players at the table, and if that is the case, you can optionally choose to play with the simplified version of a hero in order to make managing those extra characters a little bit easier. But every player does get to upgrade their character after each encounter, and the way that this works is that you're going to be drawing 3 improvement cards from your hero's deck, and then you're going to be choosing one of those to permanently add to your character. Another really cool aspect of the cards that you do choose to add to your character is that each of these cards can also be upgraded into a more powerful form as you play throughout the quests. But the way that this game works is that you're going to be choosing one of the quests, and then you're going to be going through the encounters for that quest. Whenever you set up an encounter, there's normally going to be different enemies that are going to be appearing out on the board, and whenever that's the case, each enemy is going to have its own initiative card, and each player will also have an initiative card as well. You're going to keep these cards above the board in order to keep track of the order of activation of each of the characters currently in play. But then also at the start of each round, you're going to be drawing an extra card from the deck, and this card is going to dictate the targeting behavior of the enemies and also any special effects for that round or limitations on the players. You're then going to be activating each of the characters in order of their initiative values, and if it's a player's character that's being activated, you'll be able to move up to the movement amount of your character, and then you'll be able to play one of your cards. Most of the cards do require a skill check where you're going to be rolling a die and then adding that value to your associated stat to determine whether or not the action was a success. But one thing to note about the way that these cards work is that even if you don't succeed in the action, there is usually some residual damage or a lesser effect that still will go into play. These cards can have a whole variety of effects to manipulate the board or heal or buff or nerf targeted characters, but most of these are going to be used to issue attacks. They're going to have a range, any special effects, as well as a damage amount, and when you do successfully injure a character, you're normally also allowed to push them back a single space, which can be very useful since there can be different obstacles and traps out on the board, and you can try to use those to your advantage by pushing your enemies into them. One thing to note about moving around on the board, whether it's one of your player characters or one of the enemies, is that if you are ever adjacent to an enemy character, moving out of that adjacency is going to be giving that other character a free attack. But the turns continue like this, with each character taking their actions in the initiative order, and then once all the characters have had a turn, that's going to be triggering the end of the round, and then you're going to be drawing another card to dictate the new behavior of the enemy and any special effects. And the encounters continue like this, with players completing different objectives, which can trigger the next phase of the encounter, or for different enemies or bosses to make their appearance, and the players win that quest if they're able to make it through all the encounters. I believe each quest is made up of 4 encounters, and your upgrades and different gear and items do carry over into the following quests. This team has had quite a lot of success at creating games in this genre, and I think the most successful of those games was their previously released Tanares Adventures game, but this one looks like it's going to be a lot easier to jump into and table and a lot more attainable in terms of its sheer size, because there is a lot of content for their previous games, and this one looks a lot more modest, which might make it a good starting point if you are interested in exploring what this team has to offer. As always, I will have a link to their campaign in the description down below.